India's transformation into a truly digital economy, one of the most ambitious economic and social development planks of this government, is bound to change our lives fundamentally. Of that, there's no doubt. But the pace of digitization, its acceptability in what is still a poor nation, and yet its immense promise, despite the frequent infrastructure hurdles, represent a few areas that we need to understand and grapple with in order to get a better idea of where we are headed. And then, of course, there's India's monumental digital divide, how a smartphone, a credit or debit card, or even a basic online transaction remains entirely out of the reach for millions in our country, a problem made worse by the pandemic. Joining us now, and we are extremely privileged to have him with us this evening, Ajay Banga, the Executive Chairperson of Mastercard, someone whose work traverses the digital space on a constant basis. Mr. Banga, thank you very much for being with us. Firstly, the second wave of COVID affecting the world, certainly India, at a time when green shoots appeared in some parts of our economy, and yet we are now seeing record numbers of COVID cases. How do you see this affecting the India growth story?
So it's a pleasure to be with you, Vishnu, and I think that this pandemic is teaching us all one thing for sure, and that is the humility of knowing that you cannot predict where it's going. I think each time we've all thought that we're coming out of it, it's always found a way to come back and tell you that I'm still here. And that's what we're seeing in a number of countries. Europe is seeing it as well. India is beginning to see it again. And I think it's not the first time that this has happened over the last 1 year. Way back when the pandemic began, we said that we would go through 4 stages in a way of making sure we understood how to deal with the pandemic. And the first one was containment. That is kind of the shutting down period. Everything was closing down in March last year. And the second one was around stabilization, meaning, kind of a bottom of the barrel. You were there, not much else you could go to. You weren't really going out. You weren't able to meet anybody. You were basically buying groceries and toilet paper. And the third was what we call normalization. It's not really normal. It's like the new normal. Entertainment is banned, sports events are a challenge, travel cross-border is a challenge. So that's kind of a third space. And the fourth would be back to growth, which would require, I think, widespread vaccinations done well, equitably, all the rest of that. I think what we've shown all through this period, the year has shown, is that countries have moved back and forth in these. These are not 4 linear steps. You kind of move from containment to stabilization, you find yourself going back. If you remember, Singapore and Japan went through that early in the pandemic.
Yes.
And then other examples have happened of containment going to normalization, being pulled back. I think, again, the UK went through it. Europe is going through a third wave right now. And India is going through an unfortunate situation as well. So my point of view on this is, don't take the growth story to be gone or lost because of this. This pandemic is going to take you through some cycles before the end of the tunnel becomes clearer. And I think we've got to be prepared for that.
We aren't quite there yet, are we, in India?
No, I think nowhere. I would say not just in India, but even here in the United States. Vaccinations are being made available here, like in India. They're expanding very rapidly in the US, in fact, in the last couple of months. And now the president has said that by May, he wants every American, of any eligible American, to have access to a vaccine. I think he'll get there. If you go and take a walk outside in parks, you now find mobile vans that are doing COVID testing. And in cities like where my sister lives in this country, you find actually mobile vaccination centers. So it's quite interesting that there's a big change. But boy, I don't think we're there yet. I think that so long as such a large part of the world remains unvaccinated, variants will come, and variants will come back right where the vaccination was delivered. So I think there's many steps in this COVID situation that we've got to still go through.
Do you believe
But I do want to make sure, Vishnu, you know that we're in a much better place than we used to be. Don't get me wrong. I mean, the availability of vaccines, the turnaround of the economies, the consumer spending patterns, the high level of savings, which seems to indicate a possibility of real change when people do feel comfortable. There's a lot going on that's on the positive. There's lots of challenges. In your opening, you talked about a digital divide. As we talk about the K-shaped recovery, there's a lot of challenges as well in this whole situation.
One more quick question before we talk about some of those points as well. Do you believe on an urgent basis in a country like India, one needs to start vaccination for all adults, not just 45 plus as we've seen? Because it's hitting people of
there's a lot of
across age
science.
groups.
Yeah, there's a lot of science in that. I mean, the US has also gone through this. Some states saying we'll start with these categories. Others now recently have begun to say everybody above the age of 18 or 16, as the case may be on the vaccine, is eligible for a vaccination. So I think there's no right or wrong way. We're all learning. This is the first time in a long time that society has had to face something of this type. My personal impression is you should open up vaccinations to as many people as possible. And I'll give you my very simple reason for it. My reason is that if you want to get people back to work, when they come back to work physically, I don't mean work from home, but work physically. And remember, large parts of the labor pool are working physically even now. Retail, essential services. These are people who don't have a choice. When we talk about working from home with flexibility, we're really talking about the knowledge economy workers, which are fewer than we would think. So we talk about getting them all back and coming back into the center of towns where office buildings are in a Mumbai, in a Gurgaon, in places like that. It makes a difference to all the SMEs in the neighborhood. It makes a difference to the guy you pick up your chai from, or your lunch from, or your newspaper from, or your coffee in the morning, or the haircut on the way home, or a drink in a bar on the way back. These SMEs cannot sort of be kept up on life support without the advent of people coming back to physical work. So my general belief is if you were to vaccinate larger swaths of the population, including 30 and 40-year-olds, they would come back to physical places of work and provide a much needed impetus for these SMEs.
Mr.
That's
Banga,
kind of where I'm coming from.
Sure. Now,
That's
in the context of the pandemic, how has digitization changed the face of global industry? Do you see, for example, work from home redefining the way business is conducted even after, this is all over?
Yeah. I mean, look, I think digitization is the one single biggest thing that everybody has spoken of during this pandemic. It's changed the way you shop, it's changed the way you interact, it's changed the way you conduct meetings and the like, right? And I think it surprised everybody that we were all able to work relatively productively, some say with higher productivity in this digital environment. So I think there's two sides to this. There is definitely one side that says we were able to make it work. Look at our own company. Transactions have worked without a fault, despite our employees finding it very challenging in a number of markets to go to work physically. So it's worked seamlessly, and innovation is happening and cybersecurity is being taken care of, etc., etc. But that's not the only story. Culture, innovation, onboarding new people, these things, Vishnu, I don't see them working as easily without the physical interaction that human beings crave for and desire. So my general sense is, whether it's e-commerce or it's working from home, I think the pendulum has swung a great deal one way. I don't think it should go back to the way it was, but let's not declare that it's not going backwards somewhere. It's a pendulum. Sure. It will swing back, and you can see it in markets where opening is more advanced. You look at China, you look at Australia, you look at parts of Asia where opening is advanced,
right.
And already e-commerce percentages, which had doubled at a point of time, have slipped back higher than where they were pre-COVID, but not where they were in May and June and July last year. The same for office. I mean, our office attendance in Asia is back up to a very high level.
Right. Now, India has a $200 billion internet economy and yet profound infrastructure bottlenecks. For digitization to make an even bigger difference, how key is the adoption of 5G technology in a country like ours?
Yeah, I think first of all, you're going to start with recognizing the enormous impact that digitization has had on India already. Well pursued and well pushed by the government over the last few years. I mean, Jan Dhan and the introduction of all the things that have happened in that space, I think it's quite monumental, the change. Could you do even more? Yes. Has everything been done perfectly? No. But boy, it's sure better than where we used to be. I think the way you're talking very specifically about 5G,
Yeah.
to me, Vishnu, 5G is a game changer for the whole world, not just for India. Because what it does when it's fully rolled out and implemented is it can change the way every device that you interact with could become a device of commerce and a device of education and a device of transferring of data and information. Now, you need rules and protection and privacy, and don't get me wrong, you need all that. But the way that the 5G changes the level of that possibility of commerce and data and education is enormous. And I think it'll impact India, it'll impact the US, it'll impact every country when it's fully out there and rolled out.
Yeah.
It's got many challenges between here and there, as you know, but we got to get it out there. The one thing I'd add is all this depends on standards. If we start diverging into too many standards, whether it's on 5G, as we already are between what's going on in the Western world versus the Chinese way of approaching 5G. Today, it's more about hardware. Tomorrow in 6G, it may be divergent standards as well.
Right.
I think standards enable a lot to happen. Can you imagine if broad gauge railroads did not exist in India and in every state you had to switch from one gauge to another? You wouldn't be able to run a railroad.
No.
Standards are really important. Standards domestically, standards cross-border, they enable friction and cost to be taken out.
Now, in India, we have, a huge digital divide. We talk about digitization, and yet when one looks at online education, for example, a large number of young children in our country are simply too poor to afford a smartphone, let alone a laptop or a computer, or let alone even an internet connection. So, are we being realistic about a promising future with digital when this is a present reality?
I think we have to take this whole digital divide issue on head front, because let's remember that this technology is the ultimate democratizer of the access, right? Why is that? That's a word that I coined, by the way. It's not a real word. But what I mean is, think back to when I was younger, you were younger. To get to understand something about the Galapagos, you had to have an access to the Encyclopedia Britannica.
Yeah.
That is expensive.
Yeah.
But Google's changed that. So digital is really important. There are three things that can make a difference. One is, of course, broadband infrastructure. I think government has an enormous role to play in enabling the availability of broadband infrastructure at an affordable price. But the second is devices and the price of monthly plans. Mm-hmm. And there again, I think private sector and public sector can work very strongly in that space. But the third is the most important. Even if you have access and it's affordable, if you don't make people interact with that even as part of their citizenry. So I think India is trying to make its government services available digitally, very important. People have to start embracing and trusting digital services for us to kill this digital divide over the next decade. It's going to be really important to expand education, to expand healthcare, to expand access. This is the moment we have. This is our moonshot. We shouldn't let it go.
Now, Mastercard has made a huge commitment, $33 million, I think, to support small and medium-scale enterprises in India.
Yes.
In the context of the work that you do and the digital industry that we are talking about and financial transactions, why is it this group that you have chosen to support?
So I think they've made a big commitment to SME around the world, and India's 33 million, 250 crores actually. We backed into 33 million from the 250 crore number is a real effort. It's got many components to it, from helping business go digital, from creating web stores, to actually getting them to do electronic payments acceptance. We're working with partners like the Confederation of All India Traders, CII, and the National Institute of MSMEs. And there's a section of this that is devoted to women MSMEs as well, for everything from digital to access to credit. Why is this important? If you go anywhere in the world, look at the statistics from around the world, the contribution of SMEs to employment and the contribution of SMEs to the creation of businesses overwhelms everything else. I mean, in India, the Prime Minister has a clear goal of increasing the share of exports that SMEs do. And there's a logic for that. It generates jobs and it generates the flow of prosperity downwards. It's the same thing everywhere. So my view in this, our company's view in this is, if we believe that the community will be stronger, we've got to get SMEs back on their feet. They got hit really hard in the pandemic. But my general view is the pandemic only accelerated and exposed pre-existing problems across our society.
Right.
Whether it's the digital divide or it's the impact on SMEs. I mean, SMEs have struggled to get credit, have struggled to go digital, have struggled in many ways over these years. And I think putting resources to work on getting them on their feet is in all our self-interest.
Yep.
That's kind of where I'm coming from.
Yep.
If you're a big company, Vishnu, never forget, you're a big manufacturer, their entire business is built on the back of SMEs in their supply chain.
Right.
And so nobody is immune from this issue of SMEs getting impacted.
Yeah.
We need to put our collective shoulder to the wheel to get this to work well.
Yeah. This is a question, and it comes in from a lot of people who have this concern. It's a consumer question. Is it safe for contactless credit or debit card payments? People are worried about, losing their money.
Yeah, no. Contactless payments are very safe, and for multiple reasons. One of the simplest things is that a code, a cryptogram protected code, is attached to your being able to use that contactless payment. If you do it on a phone, it's a cryptogram protected card number anyway. But if you do it on a card, there's a code that goes along. These things are very safe and highly, highly useful. I'm talking about from fraud perspective.
Right.
People have embraced them because of the concern of COVID and touching things. That's a different issue. Scientists understand that better than I do. I understand the fraud angle of this. Contactless payments are very much safe. Having said that, the spread of digitization, the spread of cashless payments, one thing you must always remember, more devices, more interaction on digital, you've got to be careful about cybersecurity. Number 1, 2, and 3. It's mission critical. And we have a lot of tools that we offer as a company, but so do others. I do believe that sharing data globally on cybersecurity is really important. Cyber thieves don't operate in borders. They operate cross-border. So you can pick up a pattern that's happening in another country and use it to preempt a possibility in another country.
Right.
Really important. Similarly, the other thing to watch out for is consumer privacy. And my general belief is that principles of consumer privacy, and I know India is actively considering a data privacy bill, which we're engaged with the government on. I think there are very simple principles. We've laid them out. And those are, I don't know how much time you have, but if you have a minute, I'll summarize them for you because they're really important.
No, please do.
The first is it's your data as a consumer and you're entitled to benefit from it. Rule 1. Rule 2. You should know what's being collected about you in simple language, not in an 18-page legal disclosure that you click without reading. Rule 3, you have the right to be forgotten. If you don't like what people are collecting about you, it should be easy for you to ask for your data to be taken out from that place. Rule 4, I as a company should collect the minimum amount of information I need to do my business with you. So in the case of Mastercard, if I have to approve your transactions, I don't need to know it's Vishnu who's spending, and I don't need to know what you bought. I just need to know a 16-digit account number, a rupee value, a merchant code, and a date and time. Why should I collect anything else? So minimize what you collect. And last rule, what you collect, you have to keep safe as a company. Those are covenants between the private sector and consumers that I think are really important to be enshrined in how data is meant to be handled and managed. So I think both cybersecurity and data privacy, completely separate from the fraud issue around contactless, which I think is a non-issue. It's actually very safe. These are important matters for the future.
In India, we have a real concern now that new rules on social media or on privacy on social media, the access that the government seeks, prosecuting agencies seek to your information, it invades privacy. Now that's a debate, as it were. What is your view on government agencies asking, for example, Mastercard, to reveal financial transactions or information on one of your consumers, your clients?
Well, we get asked all the time, but remember, I don't know that you're my consumer. I don't know Vishnu is a Mastercard holder. I just know a 16-digit number. Your bank knows that you are their consumer. And of course, the merchant where you went to shop can connect your name to the payment instrument you used, a phone or a card or a Paytm transaction or whatever. So I actually don't know your names. I get asked across the world very often for financial data whenever there's either a crime or concerns of cross-border terrorism or stuff of that type. Typically, we have rules of interaction with governments that a certain kind of judicial authority has to approve that request. That is how it happens in all countries. And we comply with that when there is a local request to the right level of judicial care. To be, like I said, I can't give you your name. I can just give you the card number and the transactions that happened in a merchant. I don't even know what you bought. So our data is actually less useful in this purpose than it is to go directly to a bank or a merchant, which is kind of what we've seen over the years. Your question's bigger than that. Your question is, I think, beyond Mastercard. It's about the issue of government data and privacy and cyber and safety. You know, my general belief is one of the biggest things governments do for citizens is provide you a safe environment. That's really important. And therefore, you cannot double guess on that topic. You have to be having a relationship with governments where they can access information that is considered to be in the overall good of their citizenry. The question is, in a democracy like India or in the US, a public debate that says, at which point is my privacy impacted as compared to the greater good of safety being delivered? And that's not, somebody outside of India cannot decide that for India. It's a debate that has to happen in India around what's good for India. And we have that debate in the US all the time, and I participate in it as a citizen as well as a corporate leader, because I believe it's my duty to participate in it. So, you know, it's a different way of thinking about these things.
But encryption is the basis of secrecy online. And therefore, if governments around the world, whether it's here in India or outside, want access to your information, they want to breach an encrypted system. Encryption is the basis of privacy, whether it's Facebook, or WhatsApp, or whatever it is. Therefore, the technology would need to change for governments to get access to this. That is a threat to privacy is one argument.
You know, I agree with you. But look at the other side of this. Your financial transactions with your bank are your personal affair. But at some point, if you were indulging in illegal transactions, the government has to be able to go in and investigate that point. Or for that matter, other such things that happen. You know, criminal activity does not deserve the shroud of privacy or protection. That's just reality.
All right.
The question is, where's the line?
It is. And I'm interrupting you now because I'm running short on time and I'm not done with this interview. I had other stuff to ask you. Firstly, you know, I follow the Indian Army very closely, and I was very interested to learn that your father was a general in the Indian Army and that you were inspired, and it's helped you obviously professionally in the level of interest he paid to his driver, to his security guard, to everyone, the sense of respect. Is that sense of respect to everybody who you work with something that's made you one of India's finest global corporate achievers?
Gosh, I don't know about the last part. You're
No,
giving
it's
me
true,
too much credit.
but answer the question. It's true, but carry on with your answer.
I believe that two things are critical to success as a leader: humility and humor. And I've said this many times, and I think humility comes from knowing that there's somebody bigger than you always, that you can learn from everybody, Vishnu. And that to me is really important. My dad taught me that. So have other leaders I've been privileged to work with. I've had some great role models who have taught me that humility, the fact that you can learn, that you can interact, that you can treat everybody with respect, with a hand on their back and not in their face, what we in our company called our decency quotient. Not just your IQ or your EQ, but your DQ. Bring your heart and mind to work. That's humility. And humor is the ability to laugh at yourself and a situation. It diffuses tension. It enables people to focus on the positive, and it enables camaraderie. I think humor done the right way and humility are two huge assets.
One final question. How much of your success do you owe to IIM? I saw a photograph of yours from back in the day with some friends. We've got it up on screen. Voila.
Yeah. My God, where'd you get that photograph
I found
from?
it on the
That's
internet.
a bunch of pals.
I found it on the internet.
Yeah.
Yeah, on Twitter. I think.
Yeah. Well, yes. I think the IIM was amazing. I think it taught me that this humility again was driven home. I came out of being a very high-performing student in school and college. You come to the IIM, everybody is as good as you. And very quickly you learn you've got to find a way to build your own relationships with people who are as good as you. And you can't just be who you are thinking, boy, I'm really good at my work. You're not. You've got to learn how to deal with people and give everybody respect. And the second is it taught me a way of thinking, Vishnu. The biggest thing I learned from the IIM was a way of thinking through a problem. Break it down into its component pieces. Try and distill what is the issue in each of those. Have a set of criteria to evaluate alternative ideas. Create alternative solutions. Evaluate them and then take a call and make a risk-based call. I love that framework. I use it all the time. It's who I am. It's the way I lead my life. And I think I owe a lot of it to both my colleagues and my teachers and the environment of the IIM in Ahmedabad.
All right, Mr. Banga, thank you so much for speaking to us. It's been wonderful to learn about your views on the digital economy all across the world and indeed how you've risen to where you are right now. Fascinating conversation. Thank you so much, sir, for being with us.
Thanks. Pleasure to be with you, Vishnu.
Thank you, sir.